Get Ready to Rock Radio, music you want to hear.
Well, we're saying hello again to one of our favourites here at Get Ready to Rock Radio and a featured artist. Hello again to you, Steve Hackett.
Hello, David.
It's nice to talk to you again, and lots has happened. Even though the last time we spoke was October 2014, we're now talking early March 2015. You've been to the States since then, and when we did, you might remember, Steve, the last time we spoke, you were hot-footing it to the premiere of that Genesis documentary. So it was in October, and I have to say you were very diplomatic when I was questioning you about that documentary, and of course a lot's happened since then, really, now that we've all seen it. Have we all moved on from this, do you think?
Well, I think so, yeah. I mean, obviously, it wasn't so much of a stitch-up, more of an amputation, I'd say. But you know, such is life, and obviously, you know, one nice thing that when we were all talking after it was shown publicly, talking to Pete Gabriel and Tony at the time, you know, Pete said, you know, what's great is that we're all still friends. And, you know, that will always be the case. So I realised that, you know, we've all given each other a lot. So it's never about the latest, you know, success or failure. It's about, you know, what it means in total.
Yes, you've got to look at it in perspective, really, I suppose. Yeah. Now, this year marks the anniversary of your very first solo album, Voyage to the Acolyte. That came out in 1975, 2 years before you formally left Genesis. I was just wondering if, as a result of these events towards the end of last year with the documentary and the fallout from that, you actually thought quietly to yourself, I'm really glad I made that decision in whenever it was, 1976, 1977, you know, to strike out on your own in a solo career.
Yes, I believe it was the only real choice that I had. If I wanted to have had some kind of relevance to music and some long-lasting self-respect, it was the beginning of an adventure that continues to this present day. Yes,
and it seems that you'll be reviving the first solo album later this year when you're on tour in the UK. We can come on to talk about that. Now, March 2015 sees the release of a brand new album, Wolflight. Now, it makes me want to go back and investigate one or two of your other albums. It's great in its own right, but I think this is one of the good things about a new album. It opens up possibilities, and I'm sure it will do that for listeners as well. I mean, is there any of your solo albums, Steve, that you think Wolflight is closest to?
Well, I don't know if it's close. Obviously, there are certain things. There are certain harmonies that I'm drawn to, and certain arrangements. The use of orchestra and world music instruments, and what's common to this and many other rock albums I've done is that it borrows from so many genres. So across the board, the pan-genre approaches really work for me to make albums that are not so much collections of songs as perhaps travelogues at times, and sometimes that sense of travelling or journeying takes you back into the past, as much of this album does, to the early roots. Some of the lyrics are talking about the ancestors and talking about early orchestras themselves, bone orchestras, which would be a grand way of saying that music originally probably came out of people literally drumming with bones and hollowing them out to make flutes. But it has some parallels with other albums that I made. I mean, I'm very fond of Spectral Mornings, and I think what I hadn't really realised at the time was that by using instruments such as the koto, the Chinese koto that I used on it, I was touching on world music areas. Before that was up and running as an idea. So I'm very proud of where that took me, and I'm very proud of where it's taken me on this album. I mean, for instance, we've got the duduk played by Rob Townsend. He never played it before, but the duduk is a great sounding little instrument that's tiny, but sounds like a cross between a flute and a woman's voice and a saxophone and a muted trumpet. It's got all those sounds within it, and he took to it like a duduk to water, really.
It's certainly got a variety of... It's lushly textured, I think, is the technical expression, isn't it? It's a beautiful production, this album. Last time we spoke, Steve, in October 2014,
yep,
you may have been putting the finishing touches. At least Roger King was doing the finishing touches, for the 5.1 mix. So
that's right. Yeah, I'm particularly proud of the way that sounds. Very, very happy with that. I finally got to the point where we've started doing, regular editions of 5.1s, whether that's me being on board or whether I hand it over to someone else. We've got some stuff with Stephen Wilson remixing earlier albums of mine in 5.1, and he's done a great job. And I just listen to it all back and make a few comments about things, reverb levels, or there might be a missing part somewhere that gets lost, via the vagaries of analog to digital, and what happened to that bit? We must have spooled it in,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was live at the time, maybe it wasn't on the 24 track. It's still a great thrill to hear that stuff and hear it sounding as symphonic as possible, because much of what I do kind of revolves around the idea of making sound bigger, and whether you're working with a literal orchestra or whether you're trying to just make a guitar sound bigger, there's so many ways you can enlarge things. So I wanted to make something that was filmic. A lot of people have been saying, well, it sounds very cinematic, but it's not designed for a film, other than the idea of perhaps a film for the ear rather than the eye. Obviously, I'd be very happy if Cecil B. DeMille is listening and he wants to use any of my stuff. Be very happy
yes.
about that. But so far, I've had a lot of stuff used for documentaries. But so far, that huge Hollywood blockbuster has eluded me. But it's only a matter of time, of course. World domination just awaits. It's just around the corner.
I'm sure it does, Steve.
You said modestly.
Now, you've said, I think, in your promotional video that you've indicated you think this is a more perhaps consistent piece of work, hangs together better than perhaps previous albums. It doesn't wander off the plot too much, is your words, in fact.
Yeah.
Does that mean then you think that some of your albums have been a little bit sort of here and there, mix and match, and perhaps haven't had that consistency?
Well, I'm always in favour of things meandering away, tributaries and streams, not just rivers and seas. I think you've got to have that, and you've got to go at it with the idea of experimenting, and it's all got to start with a doodle first of all, and then gradually that becomes hopefully a full-blown portrait. But there's something about this. I wait to hear it in my brain first of all. I don't try and force it through with too much conscious thought. It's got to either come out of the blue, and I just hear it in my mind, or if it can't be sort of precognitive like that, then I think I'll work with harmonies, and I'll sit down and I'll have to work for hours and hours over a chord sequence to see whether it truly haunts me and keeps playing itself back. And so often what happens is I've got a couple of pieces of the jigsaw in mind, and then over time it gestates, and I'll be singing it to myself, or somebody is singing it to me in the grey annals of the brain, and that fills in the other spaces. It's just that's the way that it's worked with this album. So even when it goes to an acoustic guitar piece, such as Earthshine, I feel it's stronger than before, because it echoes the previous theme in the previous song and works as a conduit into the next piece of music that's very different again. So you've gone from something that's inspired by ancient Greece to a song that was written in Mexico, and they're very different propositions. You know, one is really heavy and pounding and rhythmic, and the other one is very, very light, deliberately no drums. But acoustic guitar has provided the conduit to get there. So I find acoustic guitar can be extremely relevant, or it can bore you silly if you're not careful.
Now, evidently, Steve, the album, you've worked on it, I assume, off and on during the Genesis Revisited period, you know, when you've been touring. Has that affected you at all, in the sense that you had to make a conscious effort to switch out of Genesis mode?
Well, I think that one thing reigns supreme with the early to mid-period Genesis stuff, that the quality of harmonic progressions were without parallel from any other rock band. Its nearest relation would be stuff you've heard in classical music. And I think everyone in the band was capable, if they stretched themselves at the time of doing this. So, you know, there's something that I always feel I've got to live up to this invisible school of Genesis. You know, would this have satisfied? Would this have been worthy? Would it be rhythmically worthy of Phil? Would it be harmonically worthy of Tony? Would it be lyrically worthy of Pete? And, you know, would it have the sweetness and charm of many of the things that that Mike come up with? And will it live up to my idea of music that goes in and out of techniques, but isn't totally dependent on them? Yeah, it's nice to go virtuoso, isn't it? You get virtuoso work in flamenco, you get it in classical, you get it in jazz, not so much in pop. You get it in heavy metal sometimes, but it's got to fulfill all of the above criteria.
Now, there's always an element of darkness, I have to say, in your work, which I find rather, you know, I enjoy that aspect, really. And in the past and right to the present, you seem to have this unhealthy interest in vampires. Yes. If we go back to Guitar Noir, there was a track there, Vampire with a Healthy Appetite. Yes. And there is a track on the latest album, yes, although, of course, the subject matter is quite dark, really. Yes, Love Song to a Vampire. I mean, are you, out of interest, Steve, are you a great consumer of vampires, hammer horror?
Oh, well, indeed. I mean, I started going to see horror films from the early 60s onwards. I blagged my way in as a 12-year-old into these things and loved every minute. But my relationship to them now is much more a case of, well, this is a metaphor. In this song, it's a metaphor for abusive relationships. I think that's basically what vampires have come to represent for me. I mean, obviously, that's not the same as it is for a 12-year-old, where you're seeing Christopher Lee's teeth and heaving bosoms and all the rest. It's different.
Yes.
And it's not the stuff of Bram Stoker, but I'm talking about the Stockholm syndrome and as I say, controlling relationships, and many people that we meet are very controlling, and whether they're employers or whatever relationship, whether it's a love-hate relationship. So that's the way I've really used it in this song.
Yeah, and if we come back to the production of the album, I sense that Roger King in particular has been a really positive influence on you over the years. I mean, I think it's easy to forget that he's been with you on album at least, and more latterly, of course, live, for many a year now. And have you collaborated fairly extensively on this album, or is it mainly your own ideas which have been worked up, you know?
Well, it's a very strange relationship that that I had with Roger, because I think his own preference is for atonal music, and he's completely aware that if he ever did an atonal album himself, it would probably be of interest to about 2 or 3 people other than himself, but he would still consider that to be the job done. So I would say, he's a kind of extremist in a sense, but then that's because he's been through so many schools of harmony. He was trained as a cathedral organist, and he's done music for films. He's been involved extensively with the soundtrack of In the Name of the Father and Cliffhanger, to mention a couple, and worked with various pop stars. But it's very difficult to please Roger. So I've gotten to the point where I no longer try to please Roger, because I realise that probably everything I do couldn't possibly be dark enough. It would all seem quite saccharine to him. But nonetheless, that very critical eye or ear works very, very well in terms of any idea that I've got. He seems imperceptibly to understand what it's all about and add something constructive to it and make it better and bring the arrangement alive. So I think that he's a very, very gifted arranger and very gifted engineer as well as keyboard player. And he's still taking piano lessons even now. He's sitting down, learning to play Bach all the way through and learning to play very gentle Chopin pieces with a piano teacher. So he's always it's almost the equivalent of a cold showers man. You know what I mean?
Yes.
In a way, it reminds me of some of the moments, or the more difficult moments of working with Genesis, where you do something and absolutely pour your heart out into a song, and everyone would just be scratching their noses or something. It's that. So I no longer try to please. I don't think it's about pleasing people. I mean, I often think that if it's any lesson, other than to say to people, you've got to love what you do, it's a case of realizing that you've got to be unpopular to be popular. You've just got to hold to that original intention, stick to your guns, and see the process through, from doodle to symphony, from I Make a Noise for a Living to that number one hit, that thing where the wheels have just got to grind into motion and they've just got to keep going. You've got to reach the end of your journey, and never mind whether people say, oh, I don't like that much, or oh, I don't think much of that singer, or hasn't it got more of a beat? The naysayers are legion, and sometimes they're the people that you work closest with. So you've got to ignore that and stay on the warpath till you've won. He said unreasonably.
There speaketh the voice. Now, Roger King, though, so he obviously acts as a collaborator, a musical collaborator, but also perhaps your biggest critic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
But don't you think you need that, Steve? Though you need that person to sort of stand back and.
Well, I think I do. I think I need people to challenge things. Also, Joe, who I write with, and I've written a lot of this album with. It's constructive criticism, you see. And she will say something about, you're doing what most musicians do here. You're just repeating the same line. Whereas actually what you need is a variation. And why don't you try a variation like this? And it goes, something else. And that's invaluable. So I tend to think with that brain. I think, I better stick in a variation. Otherwise I'll be getting, the red light here from others, and Roger's impossible to please anyway, so I don't even try. But the most he will say about any piece of music I think that we've ever worked on together is, I don't mind that.
And you've cracked it
that
then.
Phrase indeed, I don't mind that.
Let's move on to the touring. I know we're ahead of that in October, but We must mention it, really.
Yeah.
You have now got a... I assume it's a regular bass player. Is it Ron? How do you pronounce?
It's Royner, actually.
Royner.
There will be a regular bass player, at least for that run of gigs, because I've worked with Nick Beggs, I've worked with Lee Pomeroy, but they're both very busy guys. They're always in demand,
Yes.
Lee's working with Electric Light Orchestra and Take That, and, they pay him billions. So, and Nick Beggs, it's like 1 year he works with Stephen Wilson, 1 year he works with me. So it's Stephen's turn at the end of this year to work with him. And we're all mates, of course, but it's going to be Royner Stolt. That's how to pronounce it.
Royner Stolt, yeah.
Flower Kings, Transatlantic, and Agents of Mercy. And he's been working with John Anderson in recent times. So, Royner's a great guitarist. He offered to play bass and 12-string for this, and I thought, he's overqualified, so I've got to have some moments where we play 6-string guitars together. So, over time we'll work out how to do that. Lovely guy, and great player, of course.
Yeah,
and I'm thrilled to have him in the band, and that's creating waves already. A load of people have been getting in touch saying, "Oh, it's great that you've got Royner in the band because he's such a genius," and indeed he is.
That's it. So we'll look forward to seeing him on stage. But one of the great things about the tour now is that, although I have to say I thought about this, and then I looked on your website, and it appears that the October tour, at any rate, is being billed as acolyte to Wolflight. That's right. Celebrating, I assume, the 40th anniversary of your debut album we started talking about.
Yeah.
Now... freed of the shackles, really, of the Genesis Revisited tour, I mean, are you ever going to shake those off? Because it's been such a successful run. You're still, in fact, in a few days, you're off to South America with that tour.
Yeah.
Now, is this tour in October a chance to perhaps revisit various music from your back catalogue? I mean, not least, of course, you're promoting a new album.
Yeah.
But one of the things in recent years, Steve, I thought, and obviously your fans would probably agree, that it does take your eye off the back catalogue, really, and it's such a wonderful wonderful thing to dip into. So what are your thoughts about that? Because you've almost like now pigeonholed the tour in the sense that you will almost certainly be celebrating that debut album, but can we expect a bit more variety on that?
Yes, well, there will be. There's so many things to celebrate, and of course, promotions and agents have said to me they wanted some Genesis stuff in there. I mean, I think that they would have been happier if I'd carried on being Genesis, And but I'm at the point where, in order politically to stay in the game, I'm having my arm twisted in order to include perhaps 40% of Genesis. And now I don't mind that because I'm very proud, I'm as proud of Dancing with the Moonlit Nights as I'm sure McCartney is proud of Eleanor Rigby. So it's not too much of an arm twist, but you see where I'm coming from.
Yes.
I need to honour the gods of the old as well as the new gods. So it's a bit of a tap dance, but I'm looking forward to it tremendously. I'm trying to figure out how the hell we're going to play some of this new stuff because, it grows up with a symphonic mindset, whether that symphony grows up in the computer, the test tube baby, or whether it's, a 70-piece orchestra. And I won't be taking a 70-piece orchestra on stage with me. No, I'm convinced that that four people can sound like an orchestra and choir. I've seen it happen. Beatles could do it. Genesis, it took 5. With my band, sometimes it takes 6. But I know that it's possible, and I'm looking forward to it. But of course,
Yeah, and that's a challenge in itself. It's always nice to stretch yourself. Just before we go, just one thing to say is that the I mean, it's always well recorded and it's always beautifully played, but the guitar sound is particularly good on this album. And I'm only listening from an MP3, as you can imagine, Steve. Any reasons, anything you discovered during the process that actually improved the sound of the guitar, if you can do that at all?
Yeah, I discovered something that helps the guitar to float electric guitars and make them sound sweeter and bigger and a bit more symphonic themselves, and that's to have a repeat echo of the sound, but have it actually quite delayed. In other words, it's not a close echo. It falls, a little bit further behind. So I might have it falling on the 2 and the 4 of the bar. In that way, it takes on a sort of majestic sound and adds some reverb to it. So, the amount of proportions of this, that, and the other. What is it that makes an exceptional guitar sound? It's a mixture of that, and then finding the sweet spot on the guitar itself, where you can find perhaps the upper harmonic, so that you're playing in a lower register, but still there's something in there that makes it slightly vocal sounding, and it's the thing that all guitarists look for, really. What is it that gives it that vocal kind of quality? So I love doing that, and I love the way we managed to get the acoustics sounding on this. To get the nylon sounding a little bit like the piano, a little bit like the harp. I look for where instruments start to sound a little bit like other instruments, where they start to sort of transcend their limits a little bit.
Well, listeners can make their own judgment. It's a beautiful album. It's out on the 30th of March, and yes, we wish you well with this, and of course the tour that starts shortly in South. Well, the tour dates in South America, and hopefully we can catch up again, Steve, before the tour in October.
Brilliant. I look forward to talking again.
That's great. Thanks, Steve, for that. I didn't mention, but I really love Black Thunder as well.
Good.
Yeah.
It's very bluesy, but
yeah.
But that's my favourite in surround, funnily enough.
I mean, would you say that we should direct listeners to the 5.1 mix for this?
I would.
Yeah.
I realise not everyone possesses a 5.1, but everyone will know someone who owns a 5.1.
Yes.
Enjoying the experience, over a Marmite sandwich or something stronger.
Great. Well, look, thanks as ever, Steve. Thanks to for your time and everything, and really great talking to you again.
All the best. Cheers. Thanks, David.
Get ready to rock.